Now we're going to download Final Cut Pro, and the easiest way to find it is just by going to Google and searching for Final Cut Pro. So we click on it, then we search, and then we're going to go to the search result that comes from Apple. So the first one comes from Apple, so we're gonna click on it. And there we go, we can now download Final Cut Pro. So for that we have two options. You can either buy it, which is going to be around $299 for it, but you can also try the free trial version and you get 90 days of free Final Cut Pro. So we're gonna go for this one, the free 90-day Final Cut Pro. So from there we just click on download now, and it's gonna be a very big file. It's around 3.2 gigabytes. So after that you're going to have to wait a little bit. Well, depending on your internet. If you have a fast internet, it's going to be very fast. Okay, so now we're going to go over the basic interface of Final Cut Pro. So if we go over to the left side, here we have our library, our smart collections, and basically the events that we have created. So remember, the events are kind of like folders, and inside the events we have the projects. And the next part is this one, which is some of the files that you have. So you can click here to look for your photos, or you can also add some stuff from GarageBand. You can add some music, even some sound effects. And if you go on the third one, we have some of the titles. For example, if you want to add some special custom titles, give it some kind of like effects, some lower thirds. For example, I can add, take for example this one, I can just add it here, and this one will look like this basically. And you can just modify it, so you can add some titles. You can also add some generators, which are kind of like colors basically. So you can add like a background solid color. You can add some different types of backgrounds. For example, I can add a curtain and it will look basically like a curtain, and I can cut it down. You can also add things like that. And you can also add some different kind of elements. You can put some shapes, some solids. For example, I can put a blue solid. I can just add it and it will basically look blue. You can add some colors. You can also put them with some textures. For example, I can add the natural texture. So this one is this part. And here in the center we have our viewer. So I added a video that I made a long time ago. So this one, you can actually see it right here. And if you want to play, you can just press the space bar. You can move your line over here and then press on the space bar to start playing. And on this part, you can also make it smaller. For example, right now I have it at fit view, but you can also make it, for example, 25% if you want to look more into the corners to make sure that everything is okay and properly centered inside the square. Or you can also zoom in, for example, over to 200, and from there you can just move around. Or maybe like 150, 100. So I'm gonna keep it at fit view so that I can see everything. And if we go over to the right side, we have all of the options for the video. So for example, if I select this video, I have a lot of options for this one. For example, I can crop it. I can select how much do I want to crop, and it will start to crop it. I can transform it if I want to move it, zoom in, scale it basically. And we also have the color correction. If we click here, we can start to modify the color a little bit. For example, I can make it brighter. I can just modify the colors. So we have many different options. We can add some kind of color right here, move the exposure, play around with this one. And then we also have the volume and the audio settings. So you can add some audio enhancements. You can change the audio, mute the audio, add some noise removal, some other effects. And if I, for example, if I was to add, for example, a title, I'm going to add a 3D title. I can add it right here. I can actually just select this one, and you will see that the options are now different. For example, I can select the parameters, all of the options, but for this title specifically. If I select the video, it will change. So now these are the options for the video. If I click here, it's the options for the text that I just created. And I can just modify it. For example, I can just type my name right here. So this part, the inspector part, is going to be very important and you will use it a lot. And then if we go down here, we have the options. here we have the transform tools, the crop or the distort. So in order to use them, make sure that you select what you want to modify. For example, now I have selected the video, and if I go over to crop, I can just crop over my video. So I can select the corners, and I personally like to put it around a 50% because I can move this better, and I can just start to trim it. So I can trim it right here, or I can just crop it. I can select the cropping option, and if I click on done, it will be cropped over. And the other one is the transform option. So this one is very useful if you want to move things. So for example, I can select my name right here, and I can click on transform, and this one I can just move around my name and I can put it wherever I want. So I can click on done and Ctrl Z to come back. And on the bottom part, here we have one of the most important parts, which is the timeline, where you can start to modify and make your cuts. So here we have some selections. We can select, we can trim, position, blade, zoom, hand. I can choose to zoom in a little bit, and then I can click on blade. I can select here, maybe I can make a cut here, and I'm doing some cuts. And then we have the index, where we can see some of the files that we have inside the timeline. So we can see some of the clips right here. So I have like 2, now that I made some cuts, I have like 2 titles, and I have a few of the video ones. Okay, and you can just basically click on index to turn it on and turn it off. And if we go over to the right side, here we have this one, which is the effects bar. So here we can find all of the effects that we can add into our video. For example, we can add maybe a cartoon effect, and I can just add it, and it will look a little bit different. Or maybe I can add this sensor effect, which will start to give it like a little bit of a blur. So there's many effects on this side. And if we go over to the right side, we have the transitions. So you can add transitions in between 2 of the videos. For example, I can add this one, and there you go, we have a transition right here. So you can also add them as well. You can add, for example, a zoom transition, and it looks a little bit like that. So yeah, you can add some transitions right here, and you can also select the transition, and on the inspector, you can select some of the preferences. For example, you can decrease the amount, and we can just add it. And it looks a little bit more decreased, not as much of a strong transition. And here we have one of the most important parts, which is the export button. So we can click here, and then we can export the file. So we can select this one, and then we can just modify the name, and then select where you want to save this file. And then we can click on file, and it will start to render your project. So after this, you will have like your actual video, your video rendered. So I can just click on save. And if you go over here to the left side, left top bar, it's actually sharing the video. It's starting to make the video, and it will finish creating the video. So 80%, 92%. And now once I go back, here I have it. Test trial 1 MP4. So I can just double click on it. And there we go. This is the video that we just modified a little bit, that we just created. And there you go. There you have the effect. So these are some of the most basic parts of Final Cut Pro. You have the file section, the projects, the viewer, then you have the inspector, the timeline where you can start editing your video. On the right side, we have the effects section, the effects and the transitions. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to organize and how to import your videos into Final Cut Pro. And I'm actually going to teach you 2 different ways, the very easy way and the more organized way. So let's start by the more organized way. So for this, we can go over to our Finder, and I personally like to keep my files in an SSD drive. So in this case, I have the Samsung T7. So now here I have a folder that is called Travel. And here I have this folder that I call Template folder. And inside this template folder, I have many different folders where I can put my audio, my exported videos, the library files, photos, and the raw videos. So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm actually going to duplicate this folder and I'm going to change the name of the folder. So I'm going to call it my trip to Sydney. Okay. And now I can just click on it. And here I have the different files. So for example, in the audio file, I have a few other sections, such as external recordings, music, special effects. And the other one is inside the videos folder. So for example, here I have the videos that come from my GoPro camera, my Samsung phone, some screen recordings, my Sony camera, as well as some stock videos that I download online. So you can actually follow this pattern as well if you would like to have it similarly to the way I have it. But basically you can modify it to the way you want. So this is the way I have them modified. And what I'm going to do now is that here I have another folder called the raw files folder. And I'm actually just going to start moving my files into the folder where they belong. So let's start with these ones. So the first three right here are music files. So I'm just going to select them and I'm going to drag them over to the music folder. And they should be now inside. And the next one, here I have a few other videos. These are MP4. And these ones come from my Samsung phone. So I'm just going to drag them over to my Samsung phone. The next ones are videos that come from my Sony ZV-1 camera. So I'm going to drag them. And here I have some JPEG files, so some pictures that I took. And this one I'm just going to put them inside the photos folder. So I'm just going to drag them there. And the last ones are the GoPro videos. So I'm just going to select them and move them over to GoPro. So there we go. We have now added our raw files into different folders inside the template folder that I created. So what I like to do is that you make the template folder so you keep all of this as a template. And once you're ready to start importing the videos, you can duplicate it and just rename it. So this one, you don't have to move it. This one, you just have to duplicate it every time you make a new project or you start to make new videos. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click here, Open Library, and I'm going to create a new library. And this one I'm going to put inside my Samsung T7. Then I'm going to go to my travel folder and trip to Sydney. And this one is going to be the library file. So I'm going to select this one, library files, and then I can click on save. And then I can put a name. So I'm going to call it trip to Sydney. Then okay, we now have created a library. And now I can just click here where it says import media. And then I can go over to my devices. Then I can go over to my travel folder and this one, trip to Sydney. So here we have this one that says copy to library files. This means that Final Cut Pro is going to duplicate your files and put them in a specific folder. So here you can actually see which specific folder it is. So it's going to place the folder in volume, Samsung T7, travel trip, and library files. So it's basically going to make a copy of it. And you can also, so if you don't want to do this, you can click on leave these files in place. So this way it's not going to duplicate all of the files that you already have, and it's going to start to take a lot of space. So I recommend clicking this one, leave files in place. And now I can click on this one, import selected. And continue import. And there we go. So now we have all of our files inside. And this is something that Final Cut Pro makes for you. For example, here we have the My Files, and inside we have all of the audio, all of the GoPro footage, all of our music, photos. So everything that is inside these folders that has something inside. For example, if a folder has nothing inside, it's not going to import it. It's just going to import whatever has footage or any files inside. And now we can actually create a new project, and I'm going to call it my trip to Sydney. So here we have our project, and now we can select, for example, the GoPro footage, and I'm going to select this one, and we can now just drag them down. And from here we can just start editing all of our videos and playing around with it. So this one is rather the more organized way. And if you actually want something much easier, You can also do it like this. For example, here you open a project. So you don't have to import the files if you don't want. You only need to have, for example, one project. And if you want to import files the easy way, you can basically just look for your file and then just drag it down. And then just like start editing from there. So this is the way I kind of like to do it sometimes, but it's not the most organized way. Because if you have a lot of footage and you want something easy, you can do it this way, where you have all of your footage straight in Final Cut Pro. But if you're kind of like lazy and you just wanted to do it the easy way, you can basically just open a project and then just start dragging your videos inside. For example, this one, then I add this one, and you can start editing from there. So this is another way that you can do it, but it's not the most organized way, but it also works. Okay, so now we're gonna learn some of the most basic A-roll cuts. So right now I added some footage and I'm going to create a new project. So I can click here on new project and I can choose on which event do I want it. So it's basically gonna be on the files event. And this one I'm going to call it, I'm just gonna call it the video project. And here I can select the video type. So I'm gonna select 1080p and this resolution, and the rate I'm gonna leave it at 29.97. And now I can click on OK, and now we have the timeline. So here we can start editing our video. So if I go up here, I can actually change the size of this to fit. So this means that if I put a video right here, I can see it in the biggest view. But if you make it smaller, for example 25, it will become smaller. But the advantage of this is that you can see where the video ends, where the corners end. For example, here we have the black area. So anything inside the black area is gonna be your video. But if you want to zoom in over the black area, you can also do it. So this function of zooming in can be helpful sometimes. So I'm gonna go back to fit and I'm going to reset it. And done. So here I have my video, which I moved from here to here. And if you want to see it, you can just press on this spacebar and it will start to play. So something I like to do is that whenever I start making my video, I like to clap. Because if you look down here where you have the audio, it makes a line go up and down. So this tells me where I can start to make my cuts. And for example, if I make a mistake, I can also clap and start once again. So this tells me that the moment I clap, I can cut from there. So for example, here I have 2 claps. And okay, so then I can start talking. But if I mess up, for example, right here, and I can just clap and start once again. So this is another thing that you can do. If you mess up, you can always clap and start once again. So now I'm gonna start making some cuts. And in order to cut, you can put your mouse basically and then you click where you want to cut, or you can basically just move the red line. So in my case, I'm going to put it around here. And in order to cut, there are 2 ways. If you go up here to where we have the mouse symbol, we have different options. So you can use the select option, the trim, to position, to select ranges. And there's also this one, which is the blade option. So if you select the blade option and then you click somewhere, you can see that it actually made a cut. So now you have this area and this area. So if you want to delete, you can just delete it. And if you want to go back, you can press Command Z and it will just undo it for you. And however, I don't like to use this blade option too much like this. I like to keep it at the select option. And I basically like to select the part I want. And then I like to click on Command V. So if you press on Command V, it will just cut it for you. So now I can just delete this one. And for example, here I have a big pause. So if I want to delete this one, I can just select here. Then I can select the part that I want to select. For example, I can select this one. Then I can select the movie that I want to cut. For example, if I have 2 movies, one on top of another one, for example, I have let's say I have this one, I have to select which one I want. So if I press Command V, it will just cut one. So in this case, I would have to select this one and then also Command B. So this is also something to keep into mind. So if you want to cut, you can select which one do you want to cut, which movie, which video. Then you can select it and press Command V. Then you can select another part and also press Command B. And then I can delete this one by pressing the backspace key. So I recommend remembering this shortcut keyboard, the Command B, to make cuts much easier. Okay, so now we're going to see some of the other different selecting features. So the first one right here is the select option. So whenever you have the select option, you can basically select any part of your video that you made a cut on. So the select option is the option that I use the most. And with this one, you can basically select any video that you have, and you can basically choose to move it around, or even, for example, select a part of the video, and then if you press Command B, you can make a cut. So this one is the most useful option in my opinion. The next one is the trim option. So whenever you use the trim option, you can basically select a part of the video, and you can even trim it a little bit. So if I select this one, I can basically just move around some parts of the video. So this one I can just basically move it around, and this one I can just basically move it around. But this option is not so useful sometimes. The next one is the position option. So for example, if I use the select option and I try to move this one up, you notice that the part of the video that comes behind it, it's going to move. But if I select the position option and then I try to move it, it will just make a blank square. It's not going to move whatever you have next to it and push it together to the left. So this one can be useful in some scenarios. And the next option is going to be the range selection. So this one basically selects a range. For example, here I have a period where I don't speak, so I can basically select it and select all of this range. And now I can maybe cut it, copy it, or even delete it. For example, if I press backspace, it will be deleted. So for example, I can select this one and I'm going to make this range right here. And now I can just click on backspace and it will delete it for you. So this can be useful in some scenarios. So for example, here I have this part where I don't speak and I'm going to select this range and delete it. Okay, and the next one is going to be the blade option, which basically cuts. But make sure that you put it into the video, because if you try to cut but the blade is in the black area, you're not gonna cut anything. So you basically have to put it in the video area. So there I can make a cut, then another cut here, then another cut here. Then I can use the select key and delete some parts. The next one is the zoom, which basically says what it does. It basically zooms in. I don't like to use this option because you can also do the same by just pinching on your mouse pad. So if I just pinch, I can do the same thing, basically like a normal phone. And you can also zoom in by pressing the command key and then using plus and minus. So if I use command and plus, which is also the equals, I can basically zoom in, and then minus, I can zoom back. So you can also do it this way. And the other option is going to be the hand option. So this one basically works very well for scrolling. So for example, if I press command plus, then I can use the hand option to just scroll around. But I personally like to use 2 fingers and then just scroll on my trackpad, which also makes the same effect. So if I pinch, I can zoom in, I can zoom back, and I can also just scroll by using 2 fingers. So I personally prefer to use this option. So from these ones, the most useful one is going to be the select option. So if you want to cut, select the part and then command B, and then delete it.